Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
So let me just set this up. So yeah, so as Edwin said, the topic today is around conflict, but it can be anything else as well that is alive for you. So if whoever wants to start maybe speaks to me, and I'll be your first listener. You've taken part in empathy circles before, Andy, have you?
Yeah, it's been a while. How long does this breakout room last for?
So usually Edwin calls us in about 20 minutes before the end.
Okay.
And because it's 4 of us, I'd say we do 5-minute turns. That's okay. Yeah, good. Right, so yeah, whoever wants to start. We all know the method, then we can just go ahead. Right, I'll start then. James, will you listen to me, please? So, yeah, I'll take a little while to arrive. I was rushing to get here, and so I think I'll, I'm looking forward to focusing on what you guys come up with, because I know that that's going to help me arrive. And to do with conflict today, I'm thinking that there's people that have left our group recently because they don't feel included enough, although there hasn't been an open conflict. But I think for myself, I'd like to explore what we're missing, that they feel excluded.
You are still arriving, and you're looking forward to whatever we bring that you think that will help you to get started. And you are yourself starting in on the fact that you're noticing that people have left your group, your local group, and you, although there hasn't been any explicit conflict, you think it's because they didn't have a sense of being included.
Yeah.
To their satisfaction.
Yeah, and that's what I feel a lot, is that by not walking towards, because maybe if some people insisted, or that could generate tensions, which could generate conflict. Maybe, let's say they have, let's say they're just thinking that our group is useless, and by not, by letting them leave, I feel like we're missing out on information. By actually engaging with them is like, yeah, so what is it about it that is useless, and can you help? I don't have any solutions, but there's something there about wanting to reach out, and seeing if there's anything that can be done, even if we don't keep them, but that we learn from it. That's my.
You're concerned that your group has not been very proactive about reaching out to people who have left. You said that you've let them leave, and you've let them leave without, let's say, engaging them or gathering the information from them about what has happened, what's led them to disengage, and you think that that's a loss, that information.
Yeah, and if I feel like if we don't do, one of the principles in XR is like reflecting and learning. And I think if we don't do that, then we won't get better over time, or like we'll get, we won't improve as much.
So a principle of XR is reflecting and learning. And without doing that, you're concerned that your group won't improve sufficiently over time.
Yeah. Thank you, James. I feel very hurt.
Sure. Bob, would you listen to me?
I'm listening.
I'm appreciative that you smiled and laughed when I mentioned that I had started a group called NVC Fuck You. And so it's a really important group to me, actually. I don't talk about it very often. I kind of came to today's Empathy Circle groups with a lot of energy and a plan to attack Edwin. I mean, I really do have frustration left over from the last 2 years with Edwin, but I'm also really I don't know. I'm trying to balance this thing, which is that, like, I think there's value in bringing up past conflicts that don't feel settled for me, for the same reasons that Marta just mentioned, where it's like, these things have happened and I don't see any learning having happened from it. So maybe there is value in bringing it up and putting it center stage. And the specific thing that I'm talking about is that I had some big conflicts in some NVC groups. Edwin had offered to do some empathy circles around that. And then when I was kicked out of those groups, he never did. He never initiated any empathy circles. I certainly was unable to, because I was blocked from these groups completely, ostracized and blacklisted. No one did or still would talk to me. But I have anger with many people, including Edwin, for kind of just dropping me. I didn't have a direct conflict with Edwin, but the fact that he just let it go, that he even said he would do empathy circles, never did, never invited people to empathy circles about what happened, it makes me really annoyed with Edwin. It makes me really annoyed, and I'm using Edwin as a kind of convenient target because he's available, because he's generous enough to do something like empathy circles, even if it's not specifically for me and my specific conflicts. But nonetheless, he's still in those groups. He still posts his links to these events in those groups. And I just think it's cowardly. I mean, I think that if he were to push the point a little bit, he'd probably be ostracized from those groups too. It wouldn't be tolerated, but so what? I got kicked out and I have to live with getting kicked out. I think other people could step up and get kicked out too, rather than just bow their heads to this kind of NVC tyrant.
So I hear you say that you appreciated my laughter and smile about the NBC Fuck You group that you're in. And
not that I'm in, that I started.
You started. And you spoke about a 2-year relationship with Edwin that hasn't gone well, that you were kicked out of NBC groups, and Edwin volunteered to have an empathy circle to talk about the issue and listen to the issue. And those never happened. And there's some anger and frustration and annoyance connected to all that.
Yes, but also that I guess I want to say that I'm not just bringing up things to grind an axe, but I'm trying to operate under these principles that Marta mentioned about reflecting and learning from what has happened. Otherwise, these conflicts will repeat themselves. And I'm frustrated in, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help us learn from real conflicts that have happened, so that we find ways to deal with them more constructively and not letting them get dropped.
So you're here because you believe that conflict is something to be dealt with, not dropped. And your participation is an effort not to let it drop and to use the XR principles of learning and reflecting for the good of all groups.
Yes, thank you. And I noticed that my time is up.
Okay. Andy, would you please listen to me?
Yes, thanks, Bob.
I'm thinking about the 60s, and I was at college in the 60s and was the target of tear gas and CN gas. And a neighbor of mine was killed by police. And I so much prefer empathy circles versus armed troops shooting at people. And I'm deeply concerned about the ability of us as human beings, as the human family, to reflect and listen to each other and learn from each other and not shoot at each other. And I'm energized, I hope in a good way, to continue this participation and be a part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Okay. Yeah, hearing Bob, you kind of recalling growing up in the 60s and how terrible conflict was when troopers were shooting at people and killing them, and how empathy circles is a much finer alternative for how we as a human family can process conflict. I'm feeling quite energized by that.
And I'm proud to be part of James's circle here today, or not James's circle, but the circle with James in it. I honor him as a determined, committed person of integrity. And I think of Jerry Rubin in the 60s, who was so outrageous. And I think James is kind of like that to me. He's a live, outrageous, honest man. And I'm grateful for this group today.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of appreciation and respect and love and valuing of James being in this group. And reminding you of this character from the 60s I'm not familiar with. Jerry Rubin, did you say? Yeah. Yeah, so there's some resonance there that, you know, these outlier characters offer us so much in the way of good feedback.
And in every era, in the 2020s especially, because that's the one we have now, we owe it to each other to be honest and a person of integrity and a little sense of humor and a little risk about provocating people. And what a wonderful process, what a wonderful container to have that happen.
Yeah, you know, valuing the integrity that people like James can bring, this provocateur role that can offer us so much insight. Yeah, really valuing and holding that as integral to how we can be more fully able to hear and to contribute.
Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess if we're doing this, it's been a while, would it be okay to ask you, Marta, to listen?
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
All right, I've kind of gone down a few rabbit holes with XR, particularly this year, as it begins to wake up again after its winter hibernation, and kind of feels like I'm becoming a rebellious rabbit. There's just no more rabbit holes left almost. So many groups I'm kind of working with, from the creative arts and extinction theatre to the transforming conflict and justice teams. And they all seem to be a bit overwhelmed with how much work they have to do and not enough people to take on the roles. And taking on all of that, it kind of has this tunnel vision, tunnel thinking effect. They don't really take on as much as they would like to be able to. And things don't get heard, things don't get appreciated and processed as well as they might like to. So I really have a sadness around that, how I want to support that, and feeling slightly overwhelmed at the moment and stepping back and saying no to some things, and wishing that other people would do the same so that they could really just function a bit better.
Yeah, so now that it's coming, you know, you're thawing from winter, and there's you're saying about being a whole lot of rabbit holes, being involved in many different groups, you know, not just the conflict resilience, but also the parts with arts, with theatre, and that all those things, you know, you're sort of spread around, and there's a lot to do, and so people around you have more to do than what they cope with, and so they feel overwhelmed. And you wish that you yourself, you're trying to, and it seems you're having some success in saying no to things, and that you wish others would be able to do the same as well, because there's a certain sadness that you were naming around just being a bit all over the place. Did I get that?
Yeah, yeah. And just speaking to people and just checking in on what groups in XR they're involved with and what they're doing. It often lands as an invitation to support that group because they are desperate for support and to have some collaboration and resources available to help them. And really, it's just saying what you're doing and how are you, and kind of land sometimes being sucked into doing that, and it feels yeah, there's some edginess and some conflict coming around how to deal with those common issues and find solutions, instead of well, that's what you want, now this is what I want, and being on the other edges of it, which is yeah, it's tricky to navigate that.
Yeah, so it's whenever, because there's a scarcity, you know, there's more work than people. Whenever you you engage and listen, just, you know, how are you doing, it all of a sudden becomes more than that, and you feel like you're being drawn into doing something with that group as well. And it just, a lot of this happening, and it's worrying that it's hard to set those boundaries clearly, so you can ask how are you without that happening. And because it seems also, the way you're naming it, it seems like it's your problem, but it's also a systematic problem happening around you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Bob, will you listen to me, please?
I'm listening.
Yeah, I also want to shower James with appreciation. I think stubbornness is a healthy thing when, you know, when our heart is in the right place, when a certain amount of stubbornness can be useful in learning, you know, in this reflecting and learning. Because if we just let go, we don't, you know, it's like if I have something, let's say in my case about my personality, and I never get feedback from it, either by thinking about it myself or asking others or doing mistakes and getting told, or if I'm not in a system where I persist in learning about things, then there's really not much evolution in there.
So you too gave James a shout out for being a voice for stubbornness and listening and reflection and learning. And you mentioned that if your personality weren't given feedback, either from your own meditations on yourself or from other people who you know feedbacking to you, you would not be equipped to evolve.
And stubbornness maybe is the wrong word because it has a lot of connotations, I suppose. I mean, persistence, resilience with, sometimes we feel complete about something and sometimes we don't. And when, I've tried throughout my life to not leave many things that make me uncomfortable when I think of them behind. Sometimes I can't always, keep on top of things. So there might be difficult times in my life where things, where a relationship is not ideal, and I move on because at that moment in time I don't have a capacity to engage with it. But it's always, going back and doing it when I know better or when I have the availability in me, so that, I'm always thinking, well, if I die tomorrow, I'd like to not have a backlog of unsaid and done things.
So the notion that if I die tomorrow, you're saying you don't want to have a lot of backlog of issues that have been unresolved. And so you admire the persistence and resilience that you can draw upon to deal with issues, to confront them, and to find resolution, and then move on after that.
But at the same time, I think it's, I don't know what James's issue, what the story that generated the conflict that made him get kicked out was. But sometimes it's difficult to get clarity on what it is that is a problem. And so sometimes it really takes time and conversations with a lot of different people that have different perspectives for us to have the aha moment about what pieces are missing in the puzzle. So I can be unsettled that something is unresolved, but I might not have the information yet that I need to be able to resolve it.
So when you have a conflict and you're not sure what the conflict was that James is involved in, when you have one, you're looking for pieces of information that can fill in the gaps to help you resolve those issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. I feel heard.
James, would you please listen to me? Since I'm not an XR member, I have to talk about what's going to happen tomorrow here in my neighborhood. There's a Democratic gathering, and there's a poll that was released today that says Bernie Sanders will win the nomination in California, and that's a lot of delegates. And I read in the LA Times and the New York Times that there are many, many Democrats who do not want Bernie to be the nominee because they feel that if he's the nominee, we will lose the House, we will continue to be the minority party in the Senate, and we will allow Trump to be elected. So I'm going to a meeting tomorrow to listen to some of this and see what's up.
Okay, so you said that because you're not an XR member, you want to focus on something that's going on locally for you, a local Democratic meeting about, I guess, a Democratic Party meeting around Bernie and whether or not he's going to win the California nomination. And people have been talking about how he's not going to win, or maybe you said that if he wins, then we'll lose the House, and the general election will go to Trump.
Exactly. And so I'm thinking I need to prepare myself for tomorrow and be as empathic as I can at this meeting and not add to the anxiety, but try to use empathy to resolve some of it.
The contribution that you want to make to this political discussion at this meeting is to be as empathic as possible so that you don't add to the tension that you know is already there, but maybe you can help diffuse some of the tension.
Right. And I think that means being honest and inviting others to be honest. And if there's emotion, that's okay. And that's what I want to do tomorrow.
You want to be okay with emotion that comes up, and you want to encourage people or do something that lets people know that it's okay to be honest.
Exactly. And thinking ahead to November 3rd, 2020, whoever wins, I want to tap into these reserves of empathy that I know are in me and be persistent and insistent and yeah, that's right. That's it.
You want to use your empathy reserves from now until November to be persistent and insistent to contribute to Bernie winning the general election.
If Bernie wins, that's fine. I'm not going to vote for him, but if he wins, that's great. If he doesn't win, that's great. But I think empathy is more important than whoever's in the White House.
So you're not going to vote for Bernie, whether he wins or not, you're okay with that, but you think that what really matters is just holding an empathic space no matter who wins.
Exactly. James, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay. Marta, would you listen to me?
Yes, James.
I couldn't help. I wanted to just get these two books since Bob mentioned Jerry Rubin. Favorite book, one of my favorite books by Jerry Rubin, Do It. And another favorite book, Revolution for the Hell of It by Abby Hoffman. Yeah, they're inspiring people to me. And I consider myself a child of the 60s. I've had Malcolm X on my mind a lot in the last week because we just passed the anniversary of his assassination. And I'm really interested in him as a figure around conflict because he was someone who brought conflict to the surface and paid the ultimate price for that by being killed. There's a lot of things he's said that I respect. The things he said about violence and nonviolence, I really respected. I still respect, and I'm finding it a useful focal point to think of some of the things going on, and what might be useful, ways that are useful for engaging conflict. He was a speaker he was an intelligent speaker, which was, I think, one of the real strong key aspects of how his work was effective. And
I'll stop you there, James.
Sure.
So you're showing your books and sharing that actually, you know, what Bob was mentioning is right there. That awesome. And that you feel you're very much a child from the 60s. And at the moment, what's very present for you, or has been, is Malcolm X, and things that are there to be learned from him, from his legacy. And it's especially something to do with him bringing conflict to the surface, and violence, and, well, non-violence in his as well. And that it's particularly relevant at the moment with everything that is happening around. And you were saying about, you're starting to say about him as a speaker.
yes, thank you. It's hard for me. I can't articulate it as well as I'd like, but it has to do with people who are full of bullshit and calling out that bullshit. So what I really like about these empathy groups is that it is connected to XR, and it's connected to a commitment to action, difficult political action, because I've been a part of so many of these really wishy-washy spiritual groups that claim to be nonviolent and claim to be empathic, and then when the rubber hits the road, they can be real mean, nasty, and violent in their own way. And so for me, the connection there is with Malcolm X, is that he was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a cult that assassinated him when they didn't like what he was saying. And that really resonates with me for these so-called NVC, nonviolent communication groups, that present a front of love and nonviolence, and they're the nastiest bastards that you'll ever run into. They're really, really horrible, and they're not the only ones. It's hard to live in integrity with these principles. It's very hard, and let me stop there. Okay.
So you're saying, particularly, you know, historically with Malcolm X, that he was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, that when he was then doing things that they didn't agree with, assassinated him. And so you're saying that you one of the reasons you're here is because you like XR engaging with these empathy things. And the thing about XR is that it actually is involved in actions, in doing things. It's not as much wishy-washy, but it's got a certain integrity or of doing things that aren't necessarily easy. And in these NVC groups that you've been a part of, it seems like they're not really aligning as much. You know, it sounds like they want to be like that, but then, as you said, when the rubber hits the road, actually you say they can be quite mean and not really embody those values at all.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Andy, will you listen to me, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I have this fear of being wishy-washy. It's that I think is quite healthy. I think it somehow keeps me grounded, because I might do all these regen things, or like just last weekend I was on a retreat, and we're doing chanting and all sorts of things that my scientific brain doesn't necessarily appreciate. And but at the same time, I'm learning to that it's not about how I'm trying to say that it's not that being wishy-washy doesn't look the way I thought it did. I can be, in these goddess retreats and all that stuff and have people with real integrity. And I can be in what looks like a very put together context, and people being very superficial to a point where it's like kind of superficial that lacks integrity.
Yeah, so there's some concern, some fear there perhaps around being feeling or seen as being wishy-washy, and embracing these principles and these groups that go into things that maybe don't make sense intellectually, valuing there's some integrity in that as well, and it has something to offer. Yeah, that's there for you. You value that.
Yeah. And when when I hold like this thing of wanting to hold empathy circles, just hearing the words empathy circles, people have all these associations with it, that it is going to be wishy-washy and emotional and gooey, and that's not necessarily what will happen. And I want to be able to share that with people as well, to share that yes, it can be emotionally deep, but it can also do all these other things. And if I myself am too hippie, or if I perceived as wishy-washy or whatever that is, does that mean that people are going to make more assumptions of what that empathy circle is going to be like because I'm the one organizing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so particularly around empathy circles and how they can be seen as new age or wishy-washy, more style and substance. And it can be like that, but also it can have this authentic connection as well. That's important. That can emerge, and really wanting to hold onto that and to give that some space. And yeah, that feels quite central to why you're in this space in the first place. That's something can really emerge that's important that you want to hold.
Yeah. And there's, and it's something to do with nonviolence. I think if, empathy circle is a way of having a nonviolence practice where you make a commitment to stay no matter what comes up. And I think we all need to sounds really horrible, that I think it will be helpful if people have a nonviolent practice in times to come, and especially one that is in relation with others.
Yeah, having these principles of non-violence at the core of it, particularly the interrelational ones for other people, that needs to be named as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Bob, would you be willing to listen?
I am willing.
Okay. All right. Kind of noticing I had two possible actions to go to today. One was XR, and one absolutely wasn't. The XR one was XR lawyers, which was targeting an oil company, doing some work for them, and try to get them to stop doing it and stop doing work that doesn't contribute and sustain us. And that was a quite safe one early this morning, which I went to. And then the one in the afternoon, which I would have gone to maybe 30 years ago, was a non-XR group wearing masks, using smoke bombs, and it was called Fuck the Banks. And they were going outside the Bank of England to make a very visible, noisy, angry protest, and not at all embracing non-violent principles, but just really being full-on angry and possibly violent when the police turned up. I'm kind of been glad that my action came first, because I wouldn't want to have done it afterwards if the police been really pissed off and agitated. Yeah, and being a union guy as well, that's my background. I'm really used to doing things the hard way, and very attritional, wearing people down, bloody minded, stubborn, being the last one standing to get what needs to be done, and appreciating non-violence as a better way of kind of an NVC, a better way of meeting those needs. But sometimes it's a real pain in the arse.
So this morning you were part of a lawyers XR group that was meeting with a bank and talking about sustained practice versus non-sustaining practice. Pretty quiet, pretty dignified, pretty adult. And then in the afternoon, you participated in a Bank of England demonstration with tear gas or smoke bombs and shouting and anger and pushing the edges of nonviolence toward the violent edge of the spectrum. And you were glad that was the morning event took place first versus the second one where the police were pretty pissed off at that. And you spoke of your union your membership, and very persistent, very stubborn, very last man standing approach to getting what you wanted.
Yeah. And I wish there were alternatives to NVC. You know, when I hear that phrase and I use it myself, would you be willing? It just kind of triggers me quite a bit. For a movement that's kind of rich in thought and articulate, to keep going back to that seems pretty basic at times. So I'm kind of valuing XR's take on that, on regenerative practices and how to evolve the language we use and the ways we communicate. So I think NVC really can support XR, but XR is its own beast as well.
So you were reflecting on the NVC component in the XR, and you think they are compatible, and it sounds like you're visioning a dynamic XR movement that draws from many sources to achieve their goals.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob.
Okay. Marta, would you please listen to me?
Yes, Bob.
I'm sort of riffling through my mental Rolodex over the past 50, 60 years. Who are the folks who live the truth, who eschew bullshit, as James might say? Country Joe McDonald, Martin Luther King, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Joan Baez in her own way, Bob Dylan, George McGovern, Tom Hayden, and so these individuals, these figures who who spoke, who stood up, and here we are in the 2020s, and who in this era will be recalled or honored even now as women, men, people. I guess the gender thing is part of it too. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and how do I relate to these folks, and how can I be a person of integrity and stand up and do my best?
You were thinking back in 40, 60 years ago and thinking, who were the people that you recall that have this integrity around them? And you named many, and activists like Luther King, or musicians like Joan Baez. And what you're wondering now is, who are the people alive right now and engaged right now that will be remembered in the future as such, as central and as important? And what is your role in that, to stay?
And I am so privileged to draw into the pool of this group and drink in the integrity and the willingness and the courage and the love and respect and the dignity that this group offers. And I want to drink this in and retain it and use it and be it.
So you're appreciating what goes on here in the people that inhabit this space that we're sharing now, and that there's qualities from it that you want to embody for yourself, like integrity.
And having mentioned entertainers and musicians, I wonder if the song "We Shall Overcome" still has any juice left in it for us.
Yeah, so you're wondering whether the song "We Shall Overcome" still has more to give. You were mentioning artists before, and you raised the question.
So maybe I can work on a new verse or two for that and sing it tomorrow at this Democratic group.
Yeah, so you might do a couple of verses for tomorrow.
Thank you, Marta. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
James, listen to me, please. Yes, I think "We Shall Overcome" still gets me crying. And this week I was watching again a recording that was done of Rebellion Week here in Ireland, in Dublin, back in October. And we were sitting in front of Dáil, which is like the house of the state. It's like where they all gather. The politicians gather. It's like the parliament, I suppose. And so we were sitting, XR, we during the week where they were sitting outside, and we sat down, and someone came. Well, I had called her, but someone I didn't know I had called. She came and she sat down and sang kirtan. It's like, the mantras thing, singing. And so we started singing with her, and we were singing for about 2 hours. And after that, she left, but we just kept singing our own songs now, but we kept singing. And so when it came for us to leave, you know, because the guards were coming, we just wouldn't leave because we were emboldened by the singing. And so, because basically the people that were inside, you know, the politicians, they couldn't leave to go home because we were in the way of them getting out with their cars. And so eventually we had a people's assembly amongst ourselves to decide we're going to move or not, because the guards came with the barricades and they were assembling the barricades on both sides. And when we had the people's assembly, it was like everyone was thinking with one brain. Anyway, it's a long story, but eventually we decided to stay, and eventually the guards ended up lifting us and moving us. And they didn't arrest us because they didn't want to. But while they did that, we sang, and there's various people crying on both sides. And it was just because, in my opinion, because of the singing, because it had sort of gotten us all in sync.
So there was an event, direct action event. People were blockading a building, and you had begun, you had begun singing with a woman, and the singing took off, and the police removed protesters, but people kept singing while you were being removed. And that created a feeling of really intense unity among, you felt really like people were thinking with one brain, between everyone who was gathered there singing together.
Yeah. And so I like that we shall overcome, but it seems like we're overcoming someone else, or I don't. And for me, I think we need a song where we're going to overcome ourselves. You know, it's like we need to overcome our education, and that's why I like NVC, you know, because it's like you had, even if you had a childhood where your parents didn't talk to each other in a nice way, you can relearn. And it's a bit with this, you know, we need songs where I don't know what they'd look like, but songs that acknowledge that we need to overcome ourselves as well.
So you feel inspired by the song "We Shall Overcome," but you are aware that the message is that you then put yourself in opposition with someone outside yourself, and you want, what you like about NVC is a focus on overcoming our own inner obstacles, and you want songs that teach us how to do that and celebrate doing that.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Great. Andy, would you listen to me?
Yes, James.
Great. I'm sorry, actually, what I wanted to do, if this is all right, I wanted to talk to the whole group. And I know it's a little different from the process we're using, but I wanted to talk to the whole group. And then when I'm done, if someone wants to reflect to me, then I wanted to try that instead. Okay. So 2 nights ago, there was a direct action here. The students are protesting at Syracuse University and they kind of occupying the administration building. And I just happened to walk by, and they were blocking the street. They were blocking traffic, and they made a circle. And I had very mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I was really happy. I think whatever the students do to stop the university is great. But I'm so angry about what happened with in my relationships with some protests, with some activists locally. I can't imagine trusting groups to be a part of a group, like to do something like that, where you're going into war basically with the local authorities. You really have to have a deep relationship of trust with the people you're working with. And my trust is so deeply broken from these activists who, when they didn't get what they wanted, they kicked me out, and they didn't want to talk to me now for years. I am, so I see this direct action, and I think, maybe I don't understand it. Maybe I don't fit in, but I don't trust. I don't trust them. I wouldn't put my, safety and all the things that I'd have to put on the line in their hands. And I'm recognizing, it's two different groups of people. It's not the same people. But I guess I'm just struggling with trust issue in general. I also, I'm just trying. I'm making a concerted effort not to to decrease the amount of storytelling that I do while I'm here, and increase the amount of stuff I'm doing to connect to you three people, because we're the ones here, and I know that it's a kind of way to avoid intimacy or conflict with people, that I'm with, to tell war stories about things that people I don't trust. So I guess I'm kind of trying to investigate to what extent I feel able of trusting you. It's very difficult because, it is difficult. It's difficult for me to square my experiences of having trust broken with, okay, yeah, I'm here and we're exchanging empathy and listening to each other, and so there's that openness. There is some openness here, and so that flies in the face of my instinctual resistance to trusting you. And I see my time is up. So would anyone like to paraphrase me?
I can do.
Please.
Yeah, so trust is very important, you, James, and there's been times in the past in your interactions with activists where that trust's been broken, and that left quite a bit of hurt there. And even now, when you're here with us, you're wondering to what extent you feel, it's possible to trust and be, but you want to. You want to be present with us, and you wonder as well whether, how much of a mechanism it is to talk about past situations and stories instead of, or just past experiences, stories, as opposed to being here present. And one story that you shared was about 2 days ago. There was this action happening at the university, and they were doing the action, and part of you got excited that you had seen the, they was happening, and it was good that they took the building. But then part of you also at the same time was like, I wonder, will I be able to, do an action like that or be in a group like that, because I don't think I'd trust people with my safety. And how do people,
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Bob, will you listen to me, please?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I'm grateful. Again, it's repetitive, James, for sharing that. Trust is a key thing in XR and in life. And trust in ourselves, trust in others. I really like the setup in XR with the affinity groups, because when people actually do what you're supposed to do in XR and you have an affinity group, ideally it's a group of people that you've been working with, for a while, and you know them, and maybe you've had empathy circles with them or some form of listening. And I'm lucky that I have a really good affinity group. People come in and out, but there's this, we've got an understanding, and that's quite important, this trust. And I've noticed that I'm not excited to do actions with people if that isn't there, because I've done it with other affinity groups while in Dublin, but it was always people that I trusted, and there was secret around it as well. It was actions where it was our action, and we could tell people about it and call them in after, but there was this closeness, even if I don't know much about them, but there's this closeness that is necessary for me to know that they're not going to do something that would conflict with my values.
So you reiterate your gratitude to James, and you talk about trust as one of the most important commodities. And you spoke of the affinity group that you're in, very wonderful collection of people who trust each other, who have faith in each other, believe in each other, and work together for one purpose. And you spoke of a trip to Dublin where there was that kind of relationship in this affinity, in this XR action, that you trusted each other and were close. There's a closeness there that you value very much.
Yeah. And what I'm wondering is how much of that trust and that relationship is embodied, because a lot of this happens like at this, I'm going to sound, at an energetic level. I don't know how to explain it, or body language level, or I don't know what it is. It just feels that way. We don't not actually spend much time talking to these people, but there's a dimension, like the way we move together, or the way we, that we'd have a meal before going and doing something, and we'd have a coffee after, and that there's no hierarchy, but there are people that take responsibility for doing this or doing that, and that's okay. There's no conflict in that, because like that's their bit. They better get it right. And yeah, I don't know what there's something that I don't know if I could fake it, but it's, I don't think we're getting it through talking to each other with our minds.
So you were offering thoughts about how trust is embodied in yourself and in a group. And it's not always a mental construct. Perhaps it's a heart construct. Maybe not even spoken about in great detail, but in a group organism, there are shared responsibilities. There's a lack of hierarchy, but there are responsibilities taken on and executed faithfully.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
Andy, would you please listen to me?
Yes, Bob.
I wrote down a list of my elected officials, our local state legislature, our national Congress, national Senate, and there are half of those folks that I trust and half that I don't. Politicians, for the most part, are in it for the power that they can wield, and all they care about is staying in office to have that power. And so I need to be a bit of a renegade, a bit of a nonconformist to see how I can work with politicians, but also realize that I need to be part of groups that are anti-political.
Yeah, so you've made this list of some local state politicians, maybe delegates, and half of them you feel you can trust and the other half not at all. There's maybe a weariness there around this is how the establishment works. They're in it for what they can get, quite a lot of them, and trying to find a way to reach out to those who maybe aren't too embedded in that system, who can do something positive, finding a way to connect to them. That feels a good way to go for you.
And to make connections at a deep level with folks who go beyond the political power trips to a very deep commitment to justice and égalité, fraternité, liberté. So I'm open to this kind of relationship and trust and fellowship that can live the cause and endure the cause.
Yeah, there's a real cherishing of these deeper connections that you can have with people who aren't part of a system, people who embody this core of justice, or looking for justice, freedom, liberty. Yeah, there's a hope of that connection, that that's a process that can still exist and thrive for you in this world.
Indeed. Thank you, Andy. I feel fully heard.
Okay. James, are you up for listening to me?
Certainly.
Yeah, so I'm just getting some recollections of last October in London, when our establishment shut down Extinction Rebellion completely, kind of overreacted and illegally shut down any right to protest at all, which caused a lot of kind of outrage and this burning sense of injustice that I felt and many others felt. And we came out, illegally the next day to say, well, what are you going to do if you can't be called at us? And last Saturday, we kind of came back to that. This felt like this was unfinished business, that we hadn't really fully responded to how the police and the system had treated us. And we had this real joyous first mass meeting of the year for XR in London, and that was the Right to Protest march. Really joyous, thousands of people there, and it just felt like connecting to everyone else again. People were actually wearing hearts and red clothing just to symbolise that this is who we are, you know, and we're going to do what the hell we want to. These are our streets as well. Well, while we were doing it, and I was part of the de-escalation team for that event, one of our coordinators he just joined got arrested. One of the de-escalators got arrested for breaching his bail conditions. And it felt like, well, this is still going on, this injustice. You're just picking on people because you can. And really wanting to hold this perspective of, well, how things are for the police and they're just doing their job, but really not feeling it at all. And yeah, not being able to debrief after the event with this colleague who got arrested, and finally managing today, just earlier today, on another call to find some space for it. You know, which is what I really value about XR, that people do get remembered and cared for. There's a real deep sense of care and commitment to each other that I trust you got my back, really, and wanted to give that to others. So that's really alive for me today, that we didn't drop that, we picked that up and we were there for each other.
So you're remembering how there was a rule that London authorities had instituted that made protest impossible or illegal, and that really made a lot of people angry. And then there was an event, the Right to Protest March, where people kind of came out and got together on this idea that, you know, we can do what we want. These streets belong to us, and we can, you know, we don't have to ask permission to protest. And then maybe that during that event, there was someone you know who was a member of de-escalation team, and they got in trouble. They got arrested for breaking their bail agreements, and you felt dissatisfied that there was not an opportunity to do some kind of debriefing or talking to him after that happened, but that you appreciate that one of the principles or one of the realities of XR is that people do care about each other and work to kind of maintain trust or look out for each other, so that if something happens, there are people who follow up, and people don't just disappear or have something bad happen to them without any follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. And there's something there as well about being vulnerable and sharing that experience as a learning point. And yeah, from our kind of debrief today, there was this commitment to, well, I want to share this with the wider group and beyond our group for XR, so we can sort of learn from this about how these kind of bail conditions work, so that others who might find themselves in that position, you know, they're a bit more supported, they're a bit more resourced. We're going to be stronger from this and not weaker. And feeling, like a lot of relief that this is a group that can learn, even though it's tough to figure out exactly what we're doing sometimes. There's a lot of not knowing, but trusting, we're going to get there.
So you have some relief that the group is capable of learning, and in particular, you want to bring the learning of this bail situation to the wider group, so that they can learn from that, and people can be aware of how to be careful around those requirements or restrictions.
Yeah, thank you, James.
if it's all right, I'd like to do again where I just speak to the whole group. So I do group therapy. I've been doing group therapy now for 2 years, twice a week. And it's very similar to this format. It's different too, but I guess this is something I brought up on Wednesday in Edwin's group, and well, first of all, I really like it. I think it's useful. I think it's very useful. I think it's I am enjoying myself right now. I look forward to these meetings, and I think there's a lot of potential here. I also think that it takes time to work with people. Maybe one of the slight differences with the therapy group is that we work with the same group of people each time. And with these calls, there can be more of a shuffle. There's less of an expectation that people show up every time. So sometimes people won't be here, or even if they are, like, we get shuffled around. And that's a difference that maybe actually I like, even though I don't like it, because I want to develop more of a bond with people, but I also like getting to know different people. So great. There's pros and cons. Somehow the fact that it's under this umbrella of being having political interest, to me it doesn't make sense to me. And this is something I'm trying to make sense out of. I mentioned this on Wednesday, and I'll say it again, that we have an agreement in my therapy group to explore our feelings and not act on them. And there's somehow in this group, there's that without that, that same agreement doesn't exist. And there's an assumption that actually this is like a political action group. So we act on our feelings. We take our feelings, or we try to plan actions, or at least there's some of these meetings are like that. There's different, right? The empathy. There's different themed meetings, but I don't know, I might be banging my head against the wall, but there's something about that doesn't make sense to me. And when I was listening to people talk about doing this empathic direct action, there's a part of me that really is like, wow, this really doesn't make sense. It's not going to happen. And we're setting ourselves up for a big failure. And then as I was listening to people kind of describe the fantasy of what it might look like, of like lots of people in the street talking with each other and empathizing with each other, I thought, it just doesn't make sense. Like the whole nature of what we do in empathy circles is this work over time that's intimate, and it's not something that happens in the street in that moment. It can overflow there if the people are doing this kind of work, but it's not going to happen in a big stadium like that. Or even if it did, it'll be so superficial that it'll be counterproductive. That's my time. I'm gonna stop, and if anybody would reflect me, please. Please, Bob.
So you mentioned the various groups you're in, empathy groups, group therapy groups, some with political context, some with emotional context, talking about expressing emotion, not acting on it, and confusion about the various motivations and intentions of these groups.
This is important. Let me just correct that. It's not about expressing emotion. It's about exploring emotion. It's a difference, but thanks.
Exploring emotion, not acting on it. And this sense of pro, con, mixed emotion, mixed feelings is very much in the forefront of who you are right now.
Yeah, I'm in this place of exploring the that dichotomy of action versus exploration, and I see it playing out in the groups that I'm participating in. Yeah, thank you.
You talk about a dichotomy of action exploration. Okay. James, would you please listen to me?
Happy to.
I delight in participating in this evolution, this time progress. And as a religious person, I have an eternal perspective on some of it, which may or may not be accurate, but that's who I am. And I want to continue to take delight in this and use my anger constructively and have it all be to a positive end.
You are enjoying participating in the this over time, and as a religious person, you feel it's relevant being a religious person and seeing the arc of time as you participate in this process, which is, I think you said maybe evolutionary, where you don't know if you're right about what you see, but at least you have a sense that it is moving forward, and you want to make sure that what you contribute through your anger is constructive.
And on this topic of religion, there is so much bad religion in the planet, all about power, maintaining power, control over others. I hope that's not my religion. I want to be an important representative of compassionate, merciful, forgiving religion, where power comes from vulnerability, not force.
So you see that religion, there are many bad religions or bad ways of practicing religion, and you don't want to be a part of that. You want to be a part of contributing to religion, which is compassionate and centered in vulnerability.
Exactly. James, thank you. Feel fully heard.
Sure. Same, I'll speak to everyone. Is it all right if I bring in a difference from before? Okay, I'm gonna ask that. I know it's not our norm, but I'm gonna do that because it helps me think about how the group is working. The difference that I want to bring in is that Bob is talking about religion as a positive force, and I'm in I really really don't like religion. I really find myself resistant to religion, and I like, I'm my thing is philosophy. I like to study philosophy. I study the history of philosophy, and there's a lot in the history of philosophy about religion. But more currently, I find a lot of frustration wherever I go in dealing with religious people. My next door neighbor that I have a lot of fights with, she considers herself a pagan, and I think that that's a source of our fighting. I'm going to be participating this weekend in a workshop for the Advanced Alternatives to Violence Project, and it's about working with prisoners and ex-prisoners, but it came out of the Quakers, and there's religious people who participate, and I don't like it. I'll just say that I don't like it, and my biggest problem is not even with the main organized religions. It's more with a kind of thinking that's religious that, for me, capitalism is a religion, and neoliberalism is a religion, and in some ways that are more destructive than the typical, Christian religion, or, but it's all in there, and so I don't know. Maybe I have more in common with you, Bob, than I know. But when I hear the religion word even brought up in that way, I know I feel a reaction inside of me that says something like, "Man, we're going to reach this impasse about something that it's not going to be possible to really understand each other." And so maybe that's a negative prediction, because I haven't had that experience with you. I'm going to stop there. So would anybody reflect me, please?
Oh, I will. So you have a neighbor who's a pagan, and you have fights with her, and you wonder if religion is at the heart of that. And there is a alternative to violence group that you're going to involving prisoners and ex-prisoners, and there are Quakers involved, and you're a little triggered by that religious component. And when I speak of religion, you're not sure that you and I will have a connection because of that different construct.
Yeah, you got me. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Marta, would you please listen to me?
Yes, Bob.
There's a friend of mine who says all labels are libels. And what I cherish in this group and in all empathy groups that I've taken part in is the deep, deep human connection, and whatever philosophical, mental, spiritual, emotional constructs we come up with as individuals, they are all totally inadequate in terms of trying to explain the deep, intimate human connection that we all have and need to work on and to come to consciousness about.
So no matter what labels we might have or different boxes and constructs that we fit in, the important part is really the deep human connection that can be felt outside of that.
Exactly. Marta, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Andy, will you listen to me, please?
Yes.
I was finding it hard not asking questions of James. And I don't usually have that problem in empathy circles, but it's because, you know, it's when you see someone and they're like, they're prodding at something, but it's just that bit further. And it's, I can sense, you know, there's a curiosity and a frustration there, and what is it more that I think about this? So, yeah, I was curious about that, about listening, but also having questions emerge about it that I wanted to be able to voice.
Yeah, so there's a noticing that usually you're okay in this environment and the empathy circles group, but today there's, you know, a particular wanting to ask questions of James of how things are for him, and yeah, kind of exploring a particular issue, and maybe there's more to it than that, and wanting to know some more for you. That's a real curiosity, Marta.
Yeah, and I find that's in general, you know, in our lives, we don't have many spaces. Oh, yeah. So we don't have many spaces where we prod at our ideas. You know, we have all these identities and we have all these assumptions about ourselves, and there's just not enough space in our interactions, or curiosity maybe with others, to prod at our ideas and see what, you know, explore them.
Yeah, so there's something there about wanting to have a space for these questions to be asked, and it not being readily available in everyday discourse. It's not really acceptable to ask questions sometimes, and that's really a life for you that, yeah, you should be able to question everything potentially. Yeah, wanting to acknowledge that.
And one of the things I really like about it here is that it's very mutual. You know, it's not like you go to a therapist and it's a very one-sided relationship. We're here, we're all present with each other, and that feels quite precious.
Yeah, not being one-sided is a precious quality, to kind of being open with each other and getting some genuine feedback. Yeah, that equality that the group offers.
Thank you, Andy. I feel heard. And Edwin's going to call us in, so I don't know if you want to share something.
I've got nothing pithy for a minute.
I have some burning stuff that I'd like to bring in with the last minute. So yeah, there's something that's really powerful for me in what Marta said, because I experience myself as often being the target of questions and questioning, and I really am glad that it came in as Marta kind of owning her curiosity rather than dumping it on me. Like I feel like the firewall of our structure really saved me there here today. And it's not at all because I don't like answering questions. In fact, I love answering questions, but I know it creates a problem. And what I'd rather have us do is all kind of cultivate our curiosity about these things so that we kind of like working together. Because I know when this curiosity somehow gets put into my chair as if I have like answers or something, what's the word? Well, I don't have the time to go into it right now, but it creates a problem. So so I'm very grateful for our structure and for the curiosity. I share the curiosity, and I also have lots of questions for Marta, for you, and for people here, and that's it.
So you're grateful for the structure. That means that you're sheltered from the questions that might come in, because in the past, things like that aren't very helpful. But you were happy that I acknowledged that the curiosity was mine and not about you.
Yeah, and it's the I'm sheltered from the expectation that I answer the questions. I love the invitation to answer whatever questions, but I also love the freedom not to. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not having pressure put on you with expectations of answering the questions. Shall we go back? Is there anything?
Happy to have spent the day doing this with all of you today. Thank you.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Andy.
And see you in the bigger group.
Oh, they are.
Great. Okay, great. Welcome back, everyone. So what we want to do now is go around and everyone have about a minute just to report back from your groups, or any highlights, or, what did you like about the process, or just any, there's some more people arriving. So we just wanted to go take 1 minute for each person to come back, report just about your experience, just anything you'd like to say, any insights you got, or just any general topics that came up. And just saw somebody message contact info. Yeah. So yeah, Bill, would you be willing to call on people again? And
sure. I have good training in calling on people. Okay. All right. Michelle, could you lead us off, please? Do you feel comfortable?
Sure. Thank you, Bill. I watched a 2-hour piece of the Empathy Circle with Edwin and Rupert Reed, and was like, wow, this is like something we need to get into, and boy, I can do this. And then when we kind of popped into our 4, and it was like very initially kind of a bit of a lumpy start, but we actually it just the process and the facilitation of Bill helping us through it was just I just can't speak highly enough about what I've gained from this and the friends I've got from this, and thank you.
All right, great. Grace?
Oh, yeah, Grace. So just to tag on to that, Michelle, it was kind of like emotional oxygen for me to be in the group with the 4 of us, Bill, Michelle, and Miss Nellie. And right, it was a surprise. I was surprised. And there were times when I thought, I wanted to take care of Bill. He's probably so bored with this. But I know that was just my own projection. It wasn't, I feel like you really you really were with us. You really were with the four of us, not just hurting us or being, taking care of us. Although there was a certain amount of that, a large amount of that I was feeling as well. So I just want to say thank you. It felt like emotional oxygen and a sort of a soft balm that I just needed today or got today.
Great, thanks, Grace. Edwin.
Oh, yeah. How was it for me? This was a real treat. This, sometimes a circle just has a real deep sort of a quality. There was a lot of support for the empathy circle itself, and so I really enjoyed that. It's like when people say, "Hey, this is really good. We need to spread this." I just feel really sort of encouraged myself. And there was a lot of just hearing a lot of support for the process itself and the desire to spread it. So that felt really good. Yeah.
Great. Nellie?
I really enjoyed being with you in the group, and I love that during the process, when the connection really happens, something more happy is is emerging. I've experienced this many times, and it's been here today as well. And it gives us energy to spread this. And I've also described in our what I'm doing, and which might be an extension to the empathy circle practice.
Great, thank you, Nellie. Marianne?
Hi, yeah, it was thoroughly enjoyable, exciting, and wonderful. Yes, to hear the enthusiasm about ways to use empathy circles, and also appreciation for the depth of experience and connection, I would say. So, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Jonathan?
Yes, so I kind of have a lot of big wow. Watched the videos, read some of the stuff online, but the experience of it is so dramatically different than the observation of it. And just really quite moved by it, and excited to make or to offer to make the empathy circle in the process, both as a foundation for meetings in the group, but also as a conflict resolution in the group, and then as individual processes, a part of what we're doing with XR America. So that's a really exciting piece, but also see how I can bring that out to my family and my community. And I think it's a central core piece to being a modern human, I think, and what we can use in the basket of tools we have. So I'm deeply appreciative of the work we did in our circle, and I'm really thankful to be here. And thanks.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Carolina?
Today's circle, well, I have this strong experience that you never know what will gonna happen, and sometimes I feel tired coming to the circle, kind of not ready to participate. That was my feeling today when I joined the meeting. But suddenly something happens, and suddenly I think, gosh, it was worth how good that I joined the meeting. And that's first thing. It was really interesting. I have a lot of ideas about comparing empathy circle and method of Dominic Barter to solving conflict, about what conflict is, about contribution to the movement, about experiencing the process. We were discussing very deeply a lot of things. So I'm very grateful for this meeting. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Bob?
today's little 4-people group helped me tap into more of my humanity, and for that I'm very, very grateful.
Thanks, Bob. Marta?
Yeah, there was something about trust that we went in today, and I'm left with thinking, wanting to explore more, that trust isn't always in the head. So if it's not in the thinking, then how can we make it happen? Something like that.
Great, thank you. Andy?
Yeah, this is my third kind of different empathy session this week. I got an emergency empathy call a couple of days ago that kind of took a lot of resources to process. Last night there was an MVC class I went to. That's a bit kind of wild and free, and some things get shared, some things don't. And tonight I really valued getting some clarity from the structure of what this offers, which is you can share one thing, but there's time because there's always a bit more that wants to be said as well. So I'm really valuing having that space to say a bit more. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Andy. And James?
Yeah, I feel very satisfied with our group, the work and conversation that we had. I wouldn't know how to summarize it, but an important part of it for me was just having space to bring up grievances, and also just trying to bring my attention to the people that I'm with, talking to, rather than focusing on things outside of our circle that are out of just out there. So deepening connection with people here, appreciating that, and appreciating the structure.
So I appreciate the courage and the compassion that was shown to everybody in the group. I make a joke that 2 hours ago you didn't know me, most of you. Now you'd let me house sit. You know, and that I think is the basis. And Marta talked about trust, and that is the basis of the nut of our dialogue that we'll need to have in order to really face the challenges that we face. And I'll give it back to Edwin.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So, okay, then, if you're feeling like taking any notes, if you took notes by hand or whatever, or you think wanted to add some notes, the document that was put in the link, maybe somebody could share that again in case you haven't seen it. It's in the chat window. You can go in there. I took some notes about our meeting. The recordings will be up in a few days, and it's good to add any notes or comments there, just to make it easy for others to see and to share in that. In half an hour, we have our facilitators support group, and let me put the link in for that one, and you can get on the agenda to. And the support group is, we just want to help you with setting up empathy circles or any kind of empathy cafes. The first part, we're going to just review the XR Empathy Circle work group. Maybe just talk a little bit about how we can develop the group a bit more. And then after that, we'll have everyone who gets on the agenda. You get 15 minutes to share a project that you're wanting to do, and you can share it and get support. You can sort of facilitate that 15 minutes any way that you would like. So again, next week we'll be doing this again, same topic. So do spread the word, invite your friends, and try to get the word out about it so we can keep growing this, and ideally, you know, bring the empathy circle, empathic listening, you know, into the XR movement and really spread it widely. So that's it. Any other closing thoughts, Carolina or Bill or Martha? Nope, you're all good. Okay, then we're all set. Great, thanks. Hope to see you in 30 minutes at the same URL too.
Stop recording.
Oh, stop recording. Yeah, it stops recording when I close too, but